Thank you, Vivek and Professor Phillips, for inviting me. And yeah, I'm Dheeraj. I'm a master student at UCSD. This is one of the works that I did at UCSD. So let's start. My whole research as of now deals with minimizing the human effort in natural language processing. Since we have like huge unlabeled data in the internet that's open everywhere, we can, I try to leverage uh, that unlabeled data for tasks like classification or generation or any NLP tasks. So this paper is related to text classification, where it's called contextualized weak supervision for text classification. I have a set of documents, and the user provides me a few label indicative words that I call seed words, and using those words, I have to classify the document, and there is no extra annotation or labeling anywhere. So let's see. Overview. First, I'm going to discuss about the problem statement, what the problem statement is, and the motivation behind this problem. And next, we are going to dig deep into our framework, which I called it Convy, and then we're gonna see these experiments and experimental study, parameter study, and the case study that demonstrates how this framework works, and yeah, conclusion and future work, and then we can have a brief Q&A. So weakly supervised classification. In this particular setting, I have a set of documents which are totally unlabeled, and target classes. I know that these are the possible classes for these documents, like soccer, law, and I have few user provided seed words. Like seed words are those words that are highly indicative of these categories. For example, for the class soccer, I have soccer, goal, and penalty. And for law, I have law, judge, and court. So my aim, the whole aim of this project is to build a document classifier using these inputs: documents, target classes, and seed words. And yeah, we just have to classify these documents into uh, the target classes mentioned here. So yeah, but here let's see what is the need of contextualization and what is meant by contextualization. So let's say I have user provided seed words as follows. For the soccer, I have soccer, goal, and penalty. And for law, I have law, judge, and court. So let's say I have these two sentences, and I have to classify using these seed words. So what would I do? The naive way is to see that there is a seed word penalty in both of these sentences, and the penalty is a seed word for class soccer. So I can just assign label soccer for these two. But this is wrong, because the penalty here, John was issued a death penalty. The penalty in this particular sentence is totally different from the Messi scored the penalty. The penalty in the first sentence represents a football or soccer penalty, whereas in the second one, it's a death penalty. So if I had contextualized these sentences, and let's say I knew that the penalty in soccer represents the goal penalty, and penalty that is related to, there is also one more penalty which is related to death penalty. If I had known this before, then I would have classified this in a better way, right? So that's why I need contextualization. I mean, I have to contextualize the words, and I also have to contextualize the seed words and understand the interpretation of a particular seed word. So this is what we do in this whole project. This is the framework. This is how it goes. First, I have your seed words, like user provided seed words, and I have raw documents from here. And so I contextualize these documents, and I extend the seed words. What is meant by contextualization? Contextualization is nothing but identifying the interpretation of each word and resolving them. For example, let's say penalty has two interpretations, as we have seen before. The court issued a penalty is penalty 0. That's what I'm calling it. And Messi scored the penalty is penalty 1. So I disambiguated these two. and I extended the seed words. I mean, instead of penalty, I have all possible interpretations of penalty. Similarly, for goal, I have all possible interpretations of goal. And again, goal has two interpretations, like the soccer goal and life's goal or any other goal. And so, yes, I extend these seed words, and then I generate the pseudo labels using these seed words and these contextualized documents. I train a text classifier using the pseudo labels as as the labels, and I train a text classifier. After training it, I get the predictions over the whole corpus. And here we propose a ranking metric which ranks the seed words and all the words in the corpus, and we get the highly ranked words and expand our seed set. And in the first iteration, along with expanding the seed set, we also resolve the interpretation of seed words and remove the seed words that are not at all related to the categories. I mean, for example, in soccer, let's say penalty 1 was related to soccer, then we have removed penalty 0 here. And then this process goes iteratively. I mean, again, using these seed words, I generate pseudo labels, and then I train classifier, and then I get the prediction, rank, expand. This is an iterative framework.
Dheeraj, I have a question. So what you did is like you first contextualize, and then you basically say, okay, so this penalty occurrence is, so basically there is two things. One is like you look at the words which are seed words and basically assign the label, class label to the document. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there is, you contextualize doc. Sorry, I lost it. Like, so there is seed words, so you are raws, and first what you do is you basically mark the corpus with the contextualized version of the doc, of the seed words.
No. I mean, here I contextualize the whole corpus, not only the seed words.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
Yeah, let's say there is a word called palm here. Palm has
Okay.
like 3 interpretations.
Oh, okay.
So I contextualize the whole word.
Okay, this is unrelated with the seed word.
Yeah, this is unrelated with the seed words. In the first step, I contextualize the whole corpus.
Okay.
And then based on the contextualization, I extend the seed words. Because I know after contextualization, the number of interpretations of each word.
Yes, okay. And then you can say, okay, this is based on the similar words, like this is occurring with this. You say, okay, this goal is actually of this goal.
Yeah.
And this is the goal for other. Okay. And then you train classifier for doing what? I didn't get the training part. Why do you need the training part if you have, like, for example, you can just use the seed words to determine the class label.
Like but these seed words are not, I mean, I just have few seed words, like three or less than 4.
Oh, okay.
So I don't get the whole coverage also. I mean, like with these seed words, I can't cover the whole corpus.
Okay, then so you use supervised technique to basically first classify, and then you basically expand your seed words using it.
Yes.
So the supervised technique, but use the label here.
Yeah, I mean, these are the pseudo labels that are generated using the seed words.
Oh, okay. The supervised technique just use the pseudo label. You don't have the actual label.
Yeah, I don't have the actual label at all.
Oh, okay. And then you basically see the correlation and then basically expand the seed set and then repeat the process.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got confused. Yeah, thank you. And now I got the point.
Yeah. So our major contributions are in this contextualization part, with contextualizing the documents and contextualizing the seed words and resolving the interpretation of seed words. And also this ranking metric, where comparative ranking, where we rank the seed words. I mean, where we rank the words and expand the seed sets by adding highly label indicative top ranked words. So yeah, let's dig deep into each of these modules. First, document contextualization. So the objective of this contextualization is to disambiguate different occurrences of the same word into several interpretations. I mean, if a particular word has like multiple occurrences, and based on its different occurrences, this contextualization aims to identify the interpretation and resolve for each word in the whole corpus. So long story short, we obtain a contextualized vector representation for each word occurrence. And then after getting these contextualized representations, we cluster them, and each cluster represents an interpretation. But how to get contextualized vectors? and how to cluster, and how many clusters. So these are the questions that we need to answer to do the contextualization, because we don't know how to get the contextualized vectors and how to cluster these vectors. And yeah, the main thing, how many clusters, how many interpretation does a word have? We have to, let's see this. So how to get contextualized vectors? Due to the, I mean, thanks to the recent progress in contextualized embeddings, we have BERT and Elmo. Our framework is compatible with any contextualized representation learning model, and we use BERT just as an example to demonstrate. And after getting the contextualized vector representations, we normalize all the contextualized representations, and we will let you know. I mean, I'll explain why we normalize it, because it helps us in the computation in future. And we use cosine similarity to measure the similarity between two vectors.
Vivek, sorry, Dheeraj, I think many people are not much aware of like contextualized representation. So can you briefly tell us about like what is contextualized representation and a brief summary kind of thing?
Okay, okay. So 1 minute, I think I have a chat.
I just message key if anybody has question, can ask. Nothing.
So yeah, contextualized vectors are nothing but a word has a representation based on the context. I mean, let's say there is a sentence called let's say in the same, let's consider this example. So here there are these two sentences: Messi scored the penalty and John was issued a death penalty. So here, based on the context, Messi scored and this penalty gets a vector representation. And similarly, based on the context that John was issued a death, this penalty gets a different vector representation. So every word based on its context and every word occurrence has a different embedding based on its context. So that's why these contextual word embeddings, since they have like different representation for different occurrences based on the context, it helps it helps us in identifying the context and their interpretation. So these are the recent techniques that were proposed, BERT and Elmo, which are like the transformer-based contextualized vector representation techniques. So yeah, we use BERT for just demonstration, and it is also compatible with Elmo and many other contextualized word representations. So how to cluster? And we use k-means algorithm to cluster all contextualized representations. And we prefer k-means because the cosine similarity and the Euclidean distance are equivalent for unit vectors. And again, if you remember, we normalize the contextualized vectors, and therefore the cosine similarity and Euclidean distance are equivalent. And we cluster significant times, which we'll figure that out in the next few slides. So we cluster significant number of times, therefore, and k-means is a pretty fast algorithm compared to others. That's why we prefer k-means. And for every cluster, we have this cluster center vector, which we view it as a symbolic representation of its respective interpretation of a word. So we have answered two questions, and move on to how many clusters.
I have a question, Dheeraj. So you did like k-mean. So k-mean is hard clustering, like it doesn't assign like soft cluster kind of thing. So what was the reason, like you want to have hard separation of like words kind of thing? That was your main reason, you don't want to have fuzziness?
Yeah, I don't want to have fuzziness because I need this rigid number of interpretations. I mean, I don't need the soft ones there because I need number of interpretations, right?
Okay, so each separate cluster is one unit or one context in which you are talking about. So you want separate out. So k-mean would be a better choice rather than using any fuzziness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I have one more question which I was like, so k-mean, like there are problems with k-mean, especially when you have like very less number of documents and very few clusters. For example, for example, I think the word will not have much more context than 3, 4 this thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 3, 4 thing. So then you mean like the number of cluster will be roughly 3, 4 or at max 7 or 6. So do you think like k-mean would be good like for this thing? Matlab, like any algorithm, is it good algorithm for less number of clusters? Do you have any like research kind of survey around it? Like any thought on this? Like if you want to cluster for a lesser number of stuff, like which algorithm would be better or something?
I mean, k-means worked pretty well for lesser number of clusters. I mean, we analyzed the number of clusters for number of words to number of clusters mapping, and there were many words which have like 2 and 3 clusters, and which
Okay.
makes sense because many words don't have more than 3 possible interpretations. There are very few
Okay.
words that have like 4 or 5, but yeah,
Okay.
it worked pretty well for 3 and yeah, 2, 3 clusters as well.
Okay. Okay. You are saying it worked well.
Yeah, yeah,
Not...
yeah. Because we have we have a threshold based on which we cluster.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, in the next slide,
Oh,
I'll
okay.
explain
Sorry,
what
I
the
jumped
threshold
ahead.
is.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Move on.
So how many clusters? And the number of clusters, let's say I'm calling it k, is chosen based on similarity threshold. So I have a threshold based on similarity between the clusters, and the number of clusters k is chosen based on that. So two clusters belong to same interpretation if the cosine similarity between these two clusters is greater than the threshold. So if the cosine similarity between the cluster center vectors is greater than the threshold, that means those two clusters are inherently representing the same interpretation. Therefore, what we do is we just keep increasing the number of clusters until there exists no two clusters with the same interpretation. So we can think it like this way: if there is a one big cluster which essentially represents the same interpretation, and if you increase the number of cluster count, I mean number of clusters, and do the k-means, then this one big cluster which is this one big cluster gets cut into 2 or 3 clusters, right? So even after cutting that off, the cluster similarity between these two child clusters will be high because those were inherently part of one cluster. So we start from like 2, k equal to 2, and then we increase based on the similarity threshold, and we keep increasing until there exists no two clusters with the same interpretation. So simply we start with 2, and then we once we cluster into 2, we check whether the cluster similarity is greater than the threshold. If it is greater than the threshold, it means like those two represent the same clusters. Therefore, the number of interpretations is 1. It's not 2. If it is less than that threshold, then we increase it to 3 and compute all pairwise similarities. If any pair is greater than the threshold, then it means those two actually belong to the same cluster, right? So then if it is greater than threshold, then we set the number of interpretations as 2. And even for 2, if it is less than the similarity threshold, then we increase the number of clusters to 4. So similarly, we keep increasing until there exists no two clusters with the same interpretation. And yeah, again, how to compute the threshold? What is the threshold here? So we have two majority assumptions that we assume throughout our framework based on which we come up with a similarity threshold. First one, I mean, these are very intuitive assumptions. First one, the majority of the occurrences of the seed words are about the semantics of the user specified class. So this means if a user provided a seed word for a respective class, then majority occurrences of that seed word in the whole corpus is about the semantics of the user specified class. I mean, let's say a user assigned penalty to the class soccer, then it means that the majority occurrences of word penalty represents soccer, not the death penalty or other penalty. This is the assumption. And this is quite intuitive an assumption because if a user has provided that word, then he must have thought, and he must be like the what do you call it? He's like the he knows how the corpus looks like. So when he or she they provided this seed word for a particular category, then the majority of the occurrences of that particular word must be about the semantics of the class that they have provided, right? So, and the second assumption, majority of the seed words are not ambiguous. They only have one interpretation. This is the second assumption. Again, because those are very highly label indicative words, then we can assume that those seed words majority of the seed words are not ambiguous and they only have one interpretation. Based on these two assumptions, we develop the similarity threshold. Yeah, how to compute similarity threshold? The threshold is based on user provided seed information. And based on the assumption that I've mentioned before, for each seed word S, we compute the median of pairwise cosine similarities between its occurrences. So for each seed word, we know all possible occurrences in the corpus, and we know the BERT embeddings for all occurrences in the corpus. So we just compute the median of the pairwise cosine similarities. So that median represents the contribution of the seed word towards the threshold. And similarly, we compute the contribution of all seed words towards the threshold, and we compute the median of those medians. Again, we take this median of these medians because we assume that majority of seed words are not ambiguous. So the first one, for each seed word S, the computing the median of pairwise cosine similarities is driven by assumption 1, where we assume that majority of occurrences of a particular seed word is about the semantics of the class. That's why if we just compute the median of pairwise cosine similarities, then it represents the contribution of that seed word towards the similarity threshold. And similarly, if we compute the median of medians, then it's like this follows assumption 2 because we assume that majority of seed words are not ambiguous. So that median is like a robust threshold. So that's why this nested median solution is based on these two assumptions. And yeah, if we observe here, there is no hyperparameter at all. This is a data-driven parameter setting. So this is like minimum human effort for the user and for also the developer. They need not tune any hyperparameters. It's a data-driven parameter setting. And let's view clusters, how they look like. For example, on your left, it is Windows cluster, the cluster for the word Windows. The red one represents opening in the wall, and the greenish blue represent Microsoft Windows. And similarly here for the word penalty, we have two clusters, penalty kick in football, the blue one, and penalty in law. We have observed like 3 clusters. For example, for the word palm, as I've mentioned before, we have 3 clusters, one for the word, one for your palm in the hand, and second one palm tree, and third cluster represented this Palm Beach in Florida. So yeah, we had 3 clusters for the word palm. And yeah, so let's move on to seed expansion. Here, the whole the aim of the seed expansion is to just expand the seed sets by adding highly label indicative words. And for this, we have to rank the words, and based on the ranking, we add the highly label indicative, highly ranked ones to their respective seed sets. So what is a characteristic of an ideal seed word S for a label L? So it is label indicative. It means that whenever this word appears, then this sort of conveys the meaning that this particular word represents the category that has been assigned to it. And similarly, it's frequent. It's quite frequent in its respective category. The seed word S is quite frequent in the documents that are labeled as L. And it is unusual. It means it's not too frequent, and it is not too rare. It is like, so we have to hit the right balance between the frequency and unusual. So yeah, we just quantify these characteristics and rank. Let's quantify each one of these. First one, the label indicative one. Here, the posterior probability of a document belonging to class L after observing a seed S should be close to 1, in the sense it has to increase the chance that it belongs to label L. So therefore, we just compute label indicativeness of L and seed word S as a ratio of number of documents predicted as class L. And out of those documents, how many documents that has seed word S? We represent it as FLS. We just take the ratio of FLS and FL. This is like the label indicative measure of that particular seed word. And similarly, the frequency here, we compute the average frequency of seed word S in documents that are predicted as L, since the average frequency is again unbounded, it could be from anywhere from 0 to infinity. We just bound it with tan h. Yeah, we apply tan h over that. And similarly, the unusualness here, the label indicative word shouldn't be too frequent. Therefore, we consider the inverse document frequency. Simply, it's just the log of number of documents in the corpus by the number of documents that the word S is in. I mean, it's the document frequency of word S. So this is the aggregated ranking score. We just compute the geometric mean of these three individual metrics. And based on this aggregated ranking score, we add top words to expand the seed set for the class L. And the next one, let's see how the seed disambiguation works. Here, the seed disambiguation means we resolve the interpretation of each seed word.
For example, wait a second. If anybody has any question till now, I don't know, people are quite so, or anything which you didn't understand, they will be happy to.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I'm not necessarily in NLP, but I've explored this sort of problem.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, bro.
Can you increase the volume?
Increase the volume. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is similar to like statistical bootstrapping with a set of seeds words, but the difference is that there's this contextualization makes the big difference in terms of the performance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, this contextualization helps mainly in fine-grained categories where the classes are so close that, you know, by the word occurrences can be quite, I would say, overlapping. So if you resolve the interpretation, then you can, then we can clearly see the distinction between the same word, which is occurring in two fine-grained categories, but those two totally represent different things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
Anyone else? So I have a question. Like, can you go to the assumption thing? Sorry, I'm asking you to go back. Like, so this first assumption is like you are saying that the seed word, majority of the occurrence of seed words are about the semantics. So are you want to say like they don't have much multi-sense kind of thing in the, for each category or each label, the majority of the word doesn't have much multi-sense nature in them kind of thing. This is your assumption, the first assumption. The second assumption, I got it like
the first assumption is like the number of I mean, let's say the word penalty has like 1,000 occurrences.
Okay.
Then it means, and out of those 1,000 occurrences, and let's say penalty is a seed word for class soccer, then out of those 1,000, more than 500 are about soccer and
okay.
And so the remaining are related to law. That's
okay. So what you are saying, it should actually be a seed word. It should be have all the properties of the seed word, which is there to be actually. And you are saying that there are occurrences of seed words for a given document. That's the claim you are saying. So seed word has this property of rareness, frequentness, and is indicated of the class and all those. So you're saying there exists for each label, there exists some words which are actually possible of being a seed words. This is your first assumption.
I mean, these are the assumptions about user-provided seed words.
User-provided seed word. Oh, okay.
This is not the assumption about all words. This is like assumption about only the user-provided seed words.
Oh, okay. So you are saying the bootstrap things are right.
Bootstrap
things are indicated.
Yeah.
Okay. And what the second assumption is not user-provided thing, no?
No. These two assumptions are about user-provided.
Oh, okay. In the second also, you're saying that the user which has given the seed word, they are not much ambiguous. They are.
Yeah.
Okay, so that we start with a very good starting initial bootstrap.
Exactly. Because the similarity threshold is computed based on the user-provided seed words, right? So that threshold need to be quite good. for this.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think there is a confusion here. I'll change the slides. I mean, I'll mention the user provided seedword. That's a nice catch.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one more question about. Can you go the median of medium thing? I think where it is. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So so first you calculate the threshold with the given seed words, and which basically you are saying is good enough because the user provided seed word are indicated of things, and yeah, it's good similarity. And then you say second assumption is you take the median of these. So there I lost a little bit, like why you take median of median? Like, can you explain a little bit about this point? Like, I think many people would have been confused on this thing.
Yeah, sure. So the first median, I mean, in the line number 2, where I compute the median of pairwise cosine similarities between all occurrences of a particular seed word, is sort of a contribution by that seed word towards the similarity threshold. And in the assumption 2, since we assume that majority of seed words are not ambiguous, so if I compute the median of contribution by each seed word, I mean, if I compute the contribution, if I compute the median over these contributions, then the median is like the 50% thing, right?
Yes.
The middle one. So from my assumption, this median is like, this indicates sort of a threshold where majority of seed words are not ambiguous.
Oh, okay. I got the point. Okay, the second median of medium is actually having that 50% mark.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that's all. Thanks. If anybody has any question, I think it's a good time to ask. Okay, cool. Thanks, Dheeraj. Thanks for the clarification. Sorry,
Sure. No problem. And yeah, here in the seed disambiguation, and please stop me whenever you have any questions. I'm happy to answer anything. Yeah. So seed disambiguation, we have these seed words, and it's all about resolving the interpretation of each seed word. So we disambiguate them based on the ranking. So simply, it's like a 3-step procedure. We consider all possible interpretations of an initial seed word, and then we generate the pseudo labels and train a classifier. It's the same as the iterative framework that we have been following. And using the classified documents and the ranking function, we just rank these all possible interpretations of this seed word. And by our assumptions again, the intended interpretation will be ranked the highest. Because again, our assumptions were like majority occurrences of a particular seed word is about the user specified class. So because of that, our intended interpretation will be ranked the highest, and we just retain that interpretation, and we just remove all other interpretations of a word in these seed words. I mean, here it's all about disambiguating the user specified seed words. And after that, there is no disambiguation because we have contextualized, and whatever we are expanding, it's about, I mean, it's all disambiguated already. So yeah,
I have so in this case, I think it's more like a feedback loop. Like you classify a document, you disambiguate, then you classify more. Like three step. In fact, you disambiguate, you classify, you get more seed word, you disambiguate, then you classify. Like these 3 loops are going on. So, and I think then the assumption which you hold are very significant important, because if they don't hold, then your starting is bad, and then you may end up in something like not so useful.
I totally agree. Yes.
So the initial label, although it's a little effort, but it's very crucial. Like for human to label the right things for each class labels, and once it's labeled very well, and it has all the property of seed words, as well as they are not much ambiguous, like then it's basically can help us fuel this feedback loop to generate better feedback.
So here all the effort from a user is just coming up with these seed words. That's it.
Yeah, initial seed word. Okay.
Initial seed words,
Okay, thank you.
And let's see these results. So here we compare it with the other state-of-the-art weakly supervised text classifiers like West class, which leverages seed words, and it generates pseudo documents, and it refines through self-training. And similarly, there is another state-of-the-art called Dr.Q, which leverages the label surface names, and it learns some dimension-aware embedding, and based on that, it classifies. And we have these ablation studies as well, which is without contextualization and without expansion. And Conv WSD is like, it's a variant of Conv with contextualization replaced by LESC algorithm. LESC algorithm is a famous word sense disambiguation algorithm. And we also compare it with upper bound, like supervised hierarchical attention network. And we can observe that especially in the fine-grained result, our framework has significant advantages over the others. So because we were able to, and we analyzed why the performance in the fine-grained scenario is quite good, because it resolves the interpretation of the words that are quite confusing. And after resolving the interpretation, the text classifier, it gets quite easy for text classifier to classify, because the interpretation is different for each one of them. And yeah, these are the results. And the parameter study here, the only parameter we have is the number of iterations. We observe that the performance increases initially and it gradually converges after like 4 or 5 iterations. Similarly for the, we tested it on New York Times and 20 News dataset. So yeah. And after the convergence point, we observe that the expanded seed words become almost unchanged, because yeah, it gets refined and refined and through the iterations, it gets almost fixed. And let's see the case study. This is a case study where we observe the expanded seed words for the category called first sale in 20 News group dataset. And this first sale category discusses about anything that is, related to selling and buying. So here we have the seed words as sale, offer, and first sale. So here, after the first iteration, without contextualization, it gets expanded to space, where space means, we have empty space sort of interpretation, and there is other space also, which is like the outer space. So after this, the plain corpus, which is like without contextualization, totally loses its way, because since there is space, it expands to NASA, and this NASA expands to moon and shuttle. So basically all these seed words get corrupted with this outer cosmos related seed words. Whereas in the contextualization case, we resolve the interpretation, and it expands into like more related and useful interpretations. For example, like offer has again 2, and it captures the right interpretation, and it expands to package, and then it expands to oboe, offers, for sale, condition. So yeah, this is a case study that demonstrates the difference between how the seed word expansion works in contextualization and without contextualization case. Yeah, that's it for our framework. In the future, we are trying to generalize this contextualized weak supervision for hierarchical classification, because in hierarchical case, things totally change because we have this hierarchical dependence. And we also aim to extend and expand our method to different types of text data, like more noisy textual data like Twitter and short texts. And I mean, short text and Twitter is a totally different ball game. So we are trying to extend our method to that. And also multilingual data and code switch data is also a potential direction to explore. Yeah, to summarize, Conv is a contextualized weakly supervised classification framework. It all starts with contextualization, where we leverage established contextualized representation techniques and user-provided seed words to contextualize the corpus. And based on all interpretations of words, we resolve the interpretation of seed words. And then we just train the classifier, and it's an iterative framework where we expand the seed sets. So this signifies the superiority of contextualized weak supervision, and we demonstrate that when labels are fine-grained, this contextualization helps, and it has a significant effect. And yeah, thank you. So please let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, please.
For this hierarchical classification, is the kind of approach you're thinking about is applying the same mechanism more than once in a subset of the overall documents and seed words?
Yeah, that's a right thing to do. I mean, that's one idea, but we can do better than that because we we know that the seed words in this particular category are quite related to the parent category, right? So it should be a subset of the parent one, and it should be different from the sibling, right?
I see.
So we can leverage that relation to do better than just expanding into their respective children.
That makes sense. Thanks.
So I have some more questions. So one is like, can you go back to your results thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you tried on New York Times in 20 groups, which are not very significantly like large data set. I do agree, like one very major thing which your method do achieve is basically fine grain results, which are very, very awesome. But so the main utility of such like thing will come when you do something like unsupervised, as is evident from the results also, when you have don't label on things and all. So do you thought of like being expanding it to some larger data set, like where like you think like the supervision is impossible and you can basically having very less. So for example, you have only 100 million has supervision, but you have 3 million documents which are there. So there, like for example, like they're using this, you can show like you can achieve to supervised level or like kind of accuracy or some larger data set. Do you thought about such experiments, and what are the challenges associated with that?
Oh, yeah, that's a nice question. We didn't think of that. We can definitely experiment and yeah. Basically, it'll establish the advantages in a real life scenario where we have like millions of documents, and it is clearly very difficult to annotate them. Yeah, that's a nice idea. We'll
Yes.
do some experiments on that.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have any thought like why, like for I can see like on the fine grain it's doing much better compared to other methods. Like what could be the possible advantage your method is offering compared to, I don't know about much about the other methods, like Word2Vec I know. But can you highlight like the differences, like what extra thing you are having compared to them so that you are able to achieve fine grain, like which is your novelty in terms of...
I think it's totally because of the contextualization where so where we have different interpretations for a seed word, for any word totally separated. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that again, it boils down to the contextualization, because in the previous approaches or previous methods, everything was word level, word related, and it was clearly difficult for pseudo labeling to achieve some good quality of pseudo labeling with word level word level thing. Whereas at the contextual level, since we have separated different interpretations, the word becomes exclusive to a particular interpretation gets exclusive to a particular label, and pseudo labeling gets more accurate because of that.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, anybody has any other questions? So for future, you are saying you are trying to extend it to cross-lingual, which look an interesting idea to me, because there you can see there is like data, label data scarcity at, for example, you may have a low resource similar kind of documents where there's label data scarcity. So
Yes.
what's your idea around this, like multilingual? Can you have any thought, or would you like to share also like anything?
For the multilingual case, basically multilingual in the sense, if let's say we have a corpus with multiple languages, I mean, it's like a code switch data. we really want to work in this particular case because, again, for the low resource languages, as you have said, it is quite difficult, and there is not much effort in those languages to classify them or to come up with something. But since we can use this framework to expand it into those languages where we have very less resources to work on, basically. And I mean, we didn't start any significant efforts in that particular direction as of now. But one thing right away on the top of my mind is like, so first, maybe separating, if I have a code switch data, I would like to know whether a particular word is let's say if you have two languages, then I think use of different language can also act as an indicator for a label. So, I mean, if a particular label has high frequent usage of a particular language than other language, then yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Anybody has any questions? We have some time for a few more questions. Okay, I don't think so. Anybody has questions? So let's do our virtual clap, and thanks Dheeraj for presenting and taking your time to present in a group. So obviously we cannot do physical clap. It will create a lot of noise. So we have this virtual clap thing, and we are also like modifying Zoom to have more option. In the next time, you will see more options in the Zoom to do things. But thanks Dheeraj for taking your time and enlightening us with your work.
Oh.
Definitely, I think many people would have liked. And if you can contact Dheeraj also later, if you have any questions or you want to participate or something, you want to work with him also, it's fine. So just email Dheeraj, and even if you don't know who to email, you can also ask me also. Anything else? And Dheeraj, if you have any feedback about the group also, you are free to send me the feedback.
Yeah.
And definitely that would be good. Okay. So let's wrap up this thing. Thanks again. Thanks everyone.
Thank you for
Dheeraj.
having me, and thanks for inviting me, Vivek. And yeah, I had a great time.
Okay.
And the code and paper is ready. I mean, is available online, so you can, if you want to play around with it and check it out, you can.
Yes. So the code and the paper is available. So it's a ACL 2020 paper, I think. Yeah. So you can look at it and maybe play with it and maybe do something interesting thing. So I don't know, many of you would be doing an NLP and will be doing an NLP project. And there is some algorithm which you will study named Basilic and bootstrapping thing. And maybe using Conway along with bootstrapping can give you some interesting results. So that's just the idea about NLP project, because you will be doing that. Dheeraj has shared the code link, so you can also look in the chat if you want. So thanks. Let's wrap up this. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Let me end the call.